Hey, Gracers. Um, yesterday's sermon did not get recorded. I'm not sure what exactly happened, but um, the internet was wonky, and for whatever reason, it didn't even record on the camera. And I was really excited about yesterday's message, and so I wanted to just kind of get at least the nuts and bolts of it up online for those of you who couldn't make it on Sunday. Because talked about the woman at the well and Jesus' conversation with the woman at the well. And I gotta tell you, like the conversation never really made a lot of sense to me. It just seemed like almost random bursts of um, dialogue that eventually got to the woman going off and telling the town that this guy told her all that she ever did. And I think that some of the context that we went over on Sunday just really opens up the conversation, and so I want to share it. I'm excited about it. So I'm going to skip some of the stuff that we did on Sunday and just kind of get pretty much right into the text. I'm doing this as simple as I can with just recording a Zoom meeting, so it'll be manageable file, upload quickly, and all that stuff. So I'm not going to have slides for you. If you want to follow along the text, just open your Bible up to John chapter 4. To get to John chapter 4, we went through John chapters 1 through 3, and we saw that John's chapters 1 through 3, and really we're focusing on 2 through 4. That there's a beautiful flow that John is like a good oral traditional storyteller, that he's revisiting themes over and over, but then bringing in new themes and highlighting the old themes with the new themes and taking themes further, and it's just super beautiful. The whole section, John chapters 2 through 4, began with a wedding at Cana, beginning with the words on the third day, which is actually a citation from Hosea, which is the prophet who married an adulterous bride and ransomed her back. And so we begin with this idea of the wedding. And the wedding with the wine, with the presence of Jesus's mom, connects us directly to the cross. And so John begins this idea that the cross is a divine proposal from God to his wayward wife, to his people, to invite them back into an intimate, pure relationship with him again. And we see connections in the next scene in verse 13, chapter 2, verse 13. There's citations there that talk about sour wine, like the sour wine that Jesus had on the cross. And so now there's a divine proposal, and the cross is tied up into themes of Passover and temple and worship. And then Jesus talks to Nicodemus, and we have this idea of a new birth that has echoes of the Valley of Dry Bones with Ezekiel. So this proposal, this Passover lamb sacrifice is going to give us a new birth that is so heavenly, so divine, that it's like a bunch of dry bones being brought back to life. And Jesus is going to be like the serpent in the wilderness, lifted up as a sign of salvation, not condemnation. And then John the Baptist literally says that Jesus is the groom, and he's the groom's friend. He delights in Jesus's voice, that he must decrease and Jesus must increase. And then we get to our text that we're at right now, where Jesus meets the woman at the well. And the crazy thing about a dude meeting a woman at a well in the Bible is, well, where did Moses meet his wife? Moses met Zipporah at a well at noon. He sat down and rested at the well and delivered Zipporah and her sisters from the shepherds. Jacob met his wife at a well. Jacob got to the well at noon. Josephus said that Moses got to the well at noon. I don't think the Bible says that. But Jacob meets his wife at a well, and he being the guy who's going to be named Israel, the wrestler, he wrestles the stone off of the well and waters Rachel's flock, and then Laban tricks Jacob, and Jacob the trickster gets tricked and has to marry two daughters. Isaac gets his wife at a well, but he's not there. Abraham's servant goes and gets the wife because that's kind of how Isaac is. Isaac's kind of a passive guy laying there, having the birthright stolen from his oldest son. His favorite son's the guy who will bring food to him while he's laying there. Rebecca is the one who waters the camels of Abraham's servant at the well, and Rebecca is the one who takes action in that relationship. And so there's this ongoing scene in the Bible, a type scene of a man meeting his betrothed at a well, and Robert Alter talks about this in a book, and it goes like this. The scene looks like this: a groom to be travels to a foreign country. He meets a girl or girls at a well, and we use the word girl on purpose because the Hebrew word is a young maiden of marriageable age. Someone draws water. The girl or girls rush home with news of his arrival, and then a betrothal is arranged, usually in connection with a meal. So all of that, we're getting John painting this beautiful picture of Jesus inviting humanity into a union with God that's like a marriage. He's the groom, we're his bride. The groom's mission is to heal us and save us from death through his death on the cross. He will be lifted up for our healing and salvation. He'll give us a resurrected life, like a bag of bones that's come back to life. He'll give us a new spiritual birth. Even though we're like an adulterous bride, he has not come to condemn us, but to save us and give us a new identity. And all of this is fulfilling the law, the prophets, and the writings. Jesus is leading a new exodus, giving water greater than Jacob's well, presenting himself as the groom, just as Hosea, Isaiah, and Jeremiah prophesied about. The Psalms sing of his relationship with God and of his mission of salvation. So let's dive into the text now of Jesus meeting this woman at the well, knowing that this is just like a type scene of a groom-to-be meeting his bride at the well. So John chapter 4, verse 1. Now when Jesus learned that the Pharisees had heard that Jesus was making and baptizing more disciples than John, although Jesus himself was not baptizing, but his disciples, he abandoned Judea and departed again for Galilee. But it was necessary for him to pass through Samaria. Therefore he came to a town of Samaria called Sychar, near the field that Jacob had given to his son Joseph. And a well of Jacob was there. Therefore Jesus, wearied as he was from the journey, was sitting beside the well. It was about the 6th hour. So here we go. We've got Jesus traveling to a foreign town, and he gets to a well. And he gets to a well that Jacob dug. And so we have the name of Jacob conjured up, Jesus sitting at a well. So we're meant to begin to have this scene activated in our minds of Jacob himself meeting Rachel at a well. Jesus sits down beside the well to rest. That's what Moses did. Moses got to the well and he sat down to rest. Jacob also arrived at his well around noon. I said earlier, Josephus says that Moses arrived at noon. Just like Jesus is avoiding the Pharisees, Moses was running from Pharaoh. So in other words, John has described this scene very intentionally to conjure up these stories of patriarchs meeting their brides at a well. We're supposed to have, and just coming off of John the Baptist declaring Jesus to be the groom, this is all super intentional. Verse 7 says, a woman from Samaria came to draw water. Jesus said to her, give me a drink, for his disciples had gone away to the city to buy food. Therefore the Samaritan woman said to him, how is it that you, being a Jew, ask for a drink from me, being a Samaritan woman? For Jews have no dealings with Samaritans. So remember how the type scene goes. The groom-to-be travels to a foreign country. He meets a girl or girls at a well, and someone draws water. Then the girl or girls rush home with news of his arrival, and a betrothal is arranged, usually in connection with a meal. So this woman, she knows the scene that she's in. I've been trying to think of a good illustration. It's like The only thing I can think of is if you're a young single person and you're at a bar, and someone comes up to you and asks to buy you a drink. I mean, um, uh, what's going on there. The person isn't just worried about you being famished. There's a conversation, and it's supposed to be maybe the beginning of some kind of romantic relationship. And so here they are at the well alone, and Jesus says, "Give me a drink." So this guy says this to her. Um, she knows that this could be some kind of romantic gesture. So she replies, "Why would a Jew ask something like this, not just of a Samaritan, but of a Samaritan woman?" Samaritans and Jews hated each other. So why would a Jew meet this Samaritan woman at a well and ask for a drink? The woman is reading the social situation, and she basically says, "I'm the last person I would expect someone like you to talk to like this." But Jesus replies to her. Verse 10, Jesus answered and said to her, "If you knew the gift of God and who is the one saying to you, 'Give me a drink,' you would have asked him, and he would have given you living water." Okay, this woman very likely has been used and abused by men. We're going to find out before too long that she has had 5 husbands, and the guy she's with now is not her husband. Generally speaking, at that time, women couldn't divorce their husbands. Men would divorce, and they could divorce for practically any reason they wanted to, it seems like. There's some rabbinical teaching that says that even if they burnt the toast, so to speak, that you could divorce your wife. You just give them a certificate of divorce. So once a woman was divorced, like she's already, clearly she made a husband unhappy. She's already been married. She's kind of used goods, culturally speaking. Probably not going to be the second husband's probably not going to be the most eligible bachelor around. This woman has had 5 husbands. Not too sure how eligible or honorable the last few men would have been. And now she's with the guy who won't even marry her. Her position in life is not great. And as a woman in a man's world, her situation is likely full of use and abuse at the hands of men. So she meets a man at a well who asks her to give him a drink. It seems a little inappropriate, especially for a Jewish man. So she kind of asks a question at what this guy's real intentions are. Maybe she expected him to say something like, "Hey, listen, lady, I'm just thirsty. Get all of it Hallmark Channel, meet your husband at the well stuff out of your head. Just give me some water, like real water." And that Jesus's response to her, if you didn't know Jesus, could sound pretty risque. You would ask for me, and I would have given you living water. Proverbs chapter 5 warns the king's son about not warns the king's son about foreign women, and in that context, it says this: Proverbs chapter 5, "Drink water from your own cistern, flowing water from your own well. Should your springs be scattered abroad, streams of water in the streets? Let them be for yourself alone, and not for sharing with strangers. Let your fountain be blessed, and rejoice in the wife of your youth." So in wisdom literature, the waters are metaphors for sexual activity. In the Song of Solomon, the idea of a sealed fountain was used to describe virginity. And the virgin bride is also said to be a garden fountain, a well of living water. In Jeremiah chapter 2, Israel is spoken of as the bride of Yahweh. Yahweh says this through his prophet: "I remember the devotion of your youth, your love as a bride, how you followed me in the wilderness, in a land not sown." We had this great adventure, something new and spectacular as a married couple, Yahweh and his people. Within this context of a bride and her husband, Jeremiah 2:12 through 13 says this: Be appalled, O heavens, at this. Be shocked, be utterly desolate, declares Yahweh. For my people have committed two evils. They have forsaken me, the fountain of living waters, as the husband, and hewed out cisterns for themselves, broken cisterns that can hold no water. Within this metaphor of Yahweh as the husband and the people, Israel, as the bride, changing out the waters from God to their own cisterns or making their own cisterns was a form of idolatry, adultery, and that was used to describe their idolatry of worshiping other gods. That the idolatry is like committing adultery, and the metaphors for committing adultery were trading out the living waters of the husband for broken cisterns that can hold no water. So Jesus just told this woman, how is it that you, she said, how is it that you, a Jew, ask from a drink from me, a Samaritan woman? And Jesus said, man, he says this gift of God stuff, but she doesn't catch on to that. What she hears him say is, I could give you living water. I could be your husband. It's no stretch to expect this woman, with her experience of men, to think that Jesus is flirting with her, and maybe with not even necessarily all that honorable of intentions. Now, we know who Jesus is. We know what he means. We know more or less what he's talking about here, about spiritual water, about living water, the gift of God. Like we've been through this. We've been through the conversation with Nicodemus. She hasn't. This is just a Jew who asked her for a drink when they were alone at a well, and now he promises to give her, that he could give her living water. And I think that Jesus is not allowing how she might interpret the situation to change the words he's choosing. He wants to use these words. He wants this woman to know that God loves her like a good husband, and that God is inviting her into a love relationship like what she has not experienced on this earth. She's interpreting it wrongly, and Jesus is giving her the dignity of her own understanding and the space to understand who he really is and what he's really saying. He's not manipulating her. He's not trying to tempt her or anything. He's what he's actually doing is patiently and lovingly, slowly holding up the identity that she's received from her own understanding of herself and how others have treated her, so that she can see it for what it is in his presence and be transformed through it. That instead of hiding it, instead of sweeping it under the rug, instead of pretending like it's not there, Jesus gives her the dignity to see it for what it is, because there's peace. We're doing this for Advent, that there's peace on the other side of the pain. So often we want to sweep the pain and the suffering, the reality of the lies that we've received, the reality of the hurts that we've received. We just want to move past it and get some kind of fake peace. But Jesus wants us to see things for what they are, to see the truth, and to walk through the pain of the real stuff and find a peace that passes understanding in him on the other side. So yeah, he's speaking directly, telling her exactly what he wants her to know. It's just that she doesn't have the context yet to hear anything but another man coming on to her. Jesus gives her the dignity of not speaking down to her. He gives her the dignity of his real words. He gives her the dignity of her own understanding in her own time. And he is giving her a beautiful picture of Yahweh himself proposing to be her husband. For now, she thinks that he's flirting with him, and she plays along. Verse 11, the woman said to him, Sir, you have no bucket, and the well is deep. Therefore, from where do you have the living water? Unless you're greater than our father Jacob. He gave us the well and drank from it himself, as did his sons and livestock. So he says, I'll give you living water. I can give you living water. And she says, Sweetie, this well is deep. I don't see a bucket. Where is your living water? Are you more manly and able to produce more living water than Jacob himself, the father of all Israel? He watered the nation produced children, and provided for his entire household. Jesus, I'm telling you, man, is meeting this woman exactly where she is. He's not manipulating her. He's speaking words of truth to her, but she does not yet have the insight to receive what he's really saying or understand what he is really offering. She interprets Jesus from her own experience, and that leads her to believe that this traveling Jew is dropping lustful pickup lines at her, and she's replying in kind. She's saying, hey, this well's deep. Let me see that living water that you've got. Are you more manly than Jacob? Jacob, who is the father of all Israel, he was able to produce his living waters, produced all of Israel. Are you better than that? She is playing this game, and the words that she's using are kind of risque back. And you know what Jesus doesn't say? He doesn't say gasp. How dare you talk to me that way? Don't you know I'm too holy to even think about sexuality at all, much less have a woman say these kinds of things to me? As if Jesus, is just too holy to look upon sin. Goodness gracious, he became sin for us. Jesus is not, he does not blush at our worst moments in life. But he stands there with us in those moments. He knows all that we've ever done, all we've ever thought, and he still proposes to us. And Jesus allows her the space to sit in the identity that she believes about herself, that she's just an object for men, so that she can actually face the tension and the pain of it all and come out to the other side. So Jesus replies to her when she says, sweetie, this well is deep. I don't see a bucket. Where's your living water? Are you more manly and able to produce more living water than Jacob himself? Jesus says in verse 13, everyone who drinks from this water will be thirsty again. But should one drink from the water that I will give him, he will never be thirsty again. Instead, the water that I will give him will become in him a fountain of water welling up toward eternal life. So he redirects the conversation back to the well. Anyone drinks of this water. So he's making a break between some of this water sexual metaphor stuff. This water will be thirsty again, but this water that I can give him, and he uses the male personal pronoun. Jesus is being a gentleman here. He uses the male pronoun to make it clear he isn't saying anything about a sexual fountain between the two of them. But we're going to say she's still not going to get it. She's still just stuck in that identity. She doesn't yet know that there's another identity for her. She still thinks that Jesus is offering a romantic relationship that would provide for her, like Jacob, maybe. She thinks Jesus's language is a metaphorical promise of real world provision, physical provision. So verse 15, the woman said to him, sir, give to me this water so that I will not be thirsty or pass through this place to draw. She literally says, all right, okay, you talked me into it. Give me what you got. Give me your water if it's so great. She's willing to give herself to yet another man. And why not? She's already been passed through men, left out to dry with a guy who won't even respect her enough to marry her now. Why not give it another shot? She says, okay, I'll take your water. And this is why Jesus' words seem so abrupt, these next words, but they're not abrupt. This is the appropriate response for this woman saying to him, give me your water. Jesus says, verse 16, go call your husband and come to this place. Jesus is clearing the air. Maybe we should continue this conversation with your husband present. She's still not getting it. She just says, verse 17, I have no husband. I'm available. We're about to find out she left out a lot, about 5 exes and another guy that she's living with right now. But everyone knows that when you're at a club getting your groove on, being single and getting your mingle on, you never talk about your exes. She just says, I have no husband. And Jesus said to her, it is appropriate that you said you have no husband, for you've had 5 husbands, and now the one you have is not your husband. This is true what you have said. And this right here, in my notes, I said, boom, this is the pivot moment. And Jesus has just brought her identity, that she probably wasn't even analyzing. You know, when you've received an identity, you don't process through it moment by moment. You just, if you've received it as your identity, you just walk in it. So she's just in it. She's just in it, an object for men to use and abuse. Maybe someday she'll find real love. Maybe they'll actually take care of her. Maybe this is the guy. So she's just going through the motions of the identity that she has. But Jesus has given her now the gift. He's held it up for her to see. How would he know this? And now she's looking at her identity squarely in the face, in the presence of Jesus. Yeah. Jesus gives us the gift of looking our baggage right in the face so we can own it, deal with it in submission to his love and grace and truth, and come out the other side with a new identity and a well-won peace. And so here's what she says in verse 19. Sir, I perceive that you are a prophet. Our fathers worshipped on this mountain, and you say that in Jerusalem is the place where people should worship. So I used to think that this woman was at this point just changing the subject because, you know, when things get personal, we always have the option of changing the subject, of talking about, you know, theological controversies or political controversies or just anything that we could not have to talk about ourselves when it gets too personal. But I don't think that's what she's doing anymore. I think what she just asked is the counterpart to her very first question. When Jesus said, hey, give me a drink. And she said, how is it that you, a Jew, ask of me, a Samaritan woman, to give you a drink? Like, are you hitting on me? Like, Jews don't do this with Samaritan women. And so now that she knows he's a prophet, she's now saying, how is it that you are having this kind of conversation? How is it that you, a Jewish prophet, clearly a prophet from Yahweh, how is it that you are having this conversation with me, a Samaritan? We said we worship on this mountain. You say you worship on that mountain. Why are you offering this free gift and this living water? Maybe she's beginning to catch on, remembering some of these prophetic voices of God's husbandship. Why would you share that with me? Like, remember the first thing, whenever this Jew asked her for a drink, she was like, I'm the last person that I would expect someone like you to talk to like this. Maybe she's saying the same thing with this question. How is this Jewish prophet offering these things to me? She's had her identity held up in front of her. She understands the shame of it all. And so she cannot understand why this prophet is giving her all this attention, offering her some kind of prophetic new living water, a free gift of God. What in the world is going on here? Verse 21, Jesus said to her, believe me, ma'am, that the hour is coming when neither on this mountain nor in Jerusalem will you worship the Father. Y'all worship what y'all don't know. We worship what we know because salvation is from the Jews. See, the hour is coming when Jew and Samaritan won't matter. When salvation comes from the Jewish people, it's not going to be about where you worship, whether you're Jew or Samaritan, Jew or Gentile. It's going to be about, have you said I do? To the proposal from Yahweh. Verse 23, but the hour is coming and is now here when the true worshipers will worship the Father in spirit and in truth. For indeed, the Father is seeking such people to worship him. God is spirit, and those worshiping him must worship in spirit and in truth. He says real worship is done in the spirit. This is the parallel to the spiritual birth that Jesus was teaching Nicodemus about. No mountain, temple, or ritual can facilitate the worship that God is really pursuing and creating among his people. It's a spiritual worship. It's a work of God, not a work of human hands. It's a birth from above, not just a birth of water. It's a new spiritual birth that no human hands, no human activity can activate. It's straight from God. The worshipers worship in spirit and in truth. So now this woman knows that this guy is close enough with God to know all that I've ever done. And now he's telling me that the Father is seeking people to worship him in spirit and in truth. And all that water talk, that was something spiritual. He was offering me to be the wife of God. He's offering it all to me. He's known all that I've ever done. And he's proposing on God's behalf to me. God still wants to be my husband. So Jesus has done two things for this woman. He held up the raw and ugly identity that she had allowed herself and others to create. He gave her that vision of that identity as a gift. And then he offered her something new and miraculous and almost unbelievable, a free gift to be identified as a true lover of God, worshiping him in spirit and in truth. And she believes. And she's ready to understand more of what's going on. So she says to him, I know that Messiah is coming, he who is called Christ. When he comes, he will proclaim all things to us. And Jesus said to her, it is I, the one speaking to you. She says, I know these things that you're talking about are true. I know that hour is coming. I believe Messiah is going to proclaim all these things to us. And Jesus says, yeah, that's me. So this 5-time divorcee living with a man who won't marry her, used and abused Samaritan woman, she gets the first absolutely clear declaration from Jesus of his identity as Messiah. She believes. She's ready to receive that hour when Messiah comes. And Jesus says, that's me. She is receiving Christ. She's saying, I do. She's stepped into an invitation to move through her old identity, not around it, but through it into a new identity in Christ, a new birth, if you will, a spiritual birth that leads to a spiritual identity of spiritual worship of a father who's seeking reborn children. Verse 27, just then his disciples came and they were marveling that he was talking to a woman. Of course they were. Why would Jesus be talking to a woman at a well? It's so inappropriate. Nevertheless, no one said, what do you seek? Or why are you talking with her? That scene, it occurred to me yesterday when I was preaching it, how awkward those goobers must have been, like all being like really uncomfortable with the situation, but not being confident enough to say anything about it. The awkwardness is just palpable and it's super fun. Verse 28, therefore the woman abandoned her water jar and went away into the city and said to the people, come, see a man who told me all that I ever did. Can this be the Christ? You see, it wasn't just that he told her all that she ever did. That's pretty miraculous. But he told her all that she ever did while proposing on behalf of God. That God knows everything that she did and still wants to call her to be his bride. That's the good news of the gospel, man. To verse 30, they went out of the town and were coming to him. We were kind of meditating on the left water jug as our Advent meditation. We talked about last week how that left behind jar represented a new hope that she had in Christ. And this, for this message, I want us to focus on the peace that left behind water jug represented. And to begin talking about the peace, I want to talk about the courage that it took for her to run to the city full of the people who knew what type of woman she was. All her exes did not live in Texas. They probably lived in that city. How could she face them with this message? Well, she could, because she had stared her old identity squarely in the face in the presence of Christ, and she received something new, a rebirth, a proposal into wedded bliss with God through the Messiah. She was new. Nothing had been swept under the rug. Nothing had been pretended away. Jesus gave her the gift of looking directly at herself, and he proposed to her that she receive a new self from him. And she said, yes. She said, I do. And so she had a peace that was stronger than her old shame. And so she abandoned that water jar and ran to town. Listen to this. She would never have to draw water the same way ever again. Think and hear that with all the metaphors that we said water could represent in this situation. She would never have to draw water the same way ever again. Her waters were made new, and she did not need to give men to drink of her anymore. She left her jar. She had true peace. The dropped jug represents a newfound peace. She dropped the jug so that she could run to her town, a town of women that she hid from by going to the well alone, a town of men who had used her and who looked down upon her as unclean or as an object for their satisfaction. She had found something that empowered her to run to that town. She ran directly to those people with something to say. She had passed through the tension of her shame and false identities. She passed through them in the presence of Christ. And on the other side was a peace that allowed her to run to the very people from whom she was hiding. This dropped water jug is an image of the peace that Christ has to offer us. A peace that does not avoid pain or suffering, a peace that does not ignore the shame and false identities we've collected in this life, but a peace that comes from passing through it all, even passing through death itself in the presence of Christ. Christ takes us through the tension of it all and delivers us to the other side, where we are defined only by his love and grace and resurrected life. A place where we worship the Father in spirit and in truth. A place where we are born again to walk in the light, to do what is true, so that it may be clearly seen that our deeds have been carried out in God. And so my invitation on Sunday, my invitation to you now, as this video wraps up, is take some time, maybe put on some instrumental music if that helps you focus. Maybe just turn off your phone and sit in silence, or take some time and sit at the well with Christ and ask him, what is my identity that I walk in that is not in line with your love and grace? Reveal to me what I allow to govern my relationships and self-awareness. Ask him a question, something like that, and wait and listen to him. And spend some time talking with him as he proposes to you at this well.